If you want to know which minions are actually worth your souls and be the final boss, Update 5, you're in the right place, because not every unit deserves a spot in your army. With how grindy the game can get, wasting your resources on a unit that falls off later can set your progression back quite a bit. So in this tier list, we're going through the units and ranking them based on how useful they really are in actual gameplay, not just how good they look on paper. We'll look at everything from early game value and farming potential to wave clearing, survivability, and overall progression. Some minions can be amazing when you first unlock them, but become pretty disappointing later on, while others might take more investment but turn into absolute monsters once you get them going. So, whether you're trying to build a strong team, farm more efficiently, or simply figure out where to spend your hard-earned resources, let's jump into the Be the Final Boss Update 5 tier list and see which minions are worth your investment. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking units in anime expeditions. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Tomb Hound, Imp Bomber, and Bone Grunt. If there is one thing these units prove, it is that being cheap does not automatically make you a bargain. First up is Imp Bomber, which at least tries to give new accounts some early area of effect damage with Cluster Bomb before better ranged options become available. Death Blast can also clean up a nasty clump when your front line suddenly decides it has had enough of life. The problem is that you are still paying 2 cost for a fragile melee damage dealer, and that is a pretty rough deal when Skeleton Archer is sitting right there. Its passive also needs Imp Bomber to die before it can contribute, so unless your strategy is literally send him in and hope for the best, there are much better ways to spend your resources. Then we have Tomb Hound, an epic assassin that sounds a lot more intimidating than it actually is. Backline Pounce can occasionally jump into an awkward enemy formation, while its opening evasion window gives it a chance to survive long enough to cause some trouble. Hamstring is also useful when it lands on the right target, giving you a respectable single target slow. Unfortunately, the rest of the package is held together with wishful thinking. Its attack is low, its health is terrible, and it has no sustain whatsoever, so this supposedly deadly assassin often ends up looking more like a very determined dog running into traffic. At 2 cost, that inconsistent utility is simply not enough when reliable range damage or another frontline unit can do far more for your team. And finally, we have Bone Grunt, the classic you have to start somewhere unit. It is available immediately, costs just 1 population, and can do a perfectly acceptable job of holding the line while you learn how the game works. Cheap copies also make it easy to fill out your index and pick up a few early levels, but once you understand the basic loop, Bone Grunt quickly starts showing its age. Its stats are basic, its kit is basic, and honestly, even its ambitions seem basic. Investing heavily into it only means delaying much stronger early targets, especially Skeleton Archer and Bone Guard. So while Bone Grunt has a place at the beginning of your journey, keeping it around for too long is basically paying your starter unit a salary it definitely has not earned. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Soul Collector, Necromancer, Iron Skeleton, Grave Warlock, Cursed Acolyte, and Blood Gargoyle. Iron Skeleton is where things start getting a little more respectable, because at least this guy understands that his job is to stand there and refuse to leave. Self-repair provides reliable healing whenever Iron Skeleton is missing health, while its active mitigation window gives it another layer of protection when things get dangerous. At 2 cost, that is a pretty reasonable package for an early to mid game wall. The catch is that its damage contribution is basically a rounding error, and once Bone Guard becomes available, you get stronger team utility. Mighty Orc also leaves Iron Skeleton looking rather outdated with its superior sustain and scaling. So, solid wall, but definitely not the final destination. Grave Warlock is much more straightforward. Point it at enemies, press the ability, and let the area of effect damage do the talking. Its 5 target area of effect attack gives you decent wave clear for only 2 cost, making it a perfectly serviceable filler when you need some extra damage. The 13 range active also makes positioning much easier than dealing with some of those short range abilities that require your units to practically hug the enemy. Unfortunately, Grave Warlock has no passive, which makes Lava Imp a much better sustained and single target damage option at the same cost. and when you consider the epic upgrade requirements, it becomes pretty difficult to justify investing heavily in a unit when Skeleton Archer is already doing the cheap damage job so efficiently. Blood Gargoyle, meanwhile, is basically the definition of a temporary tank. Its high base health and percentage-based healing allow it to absorb a respectable amount of punishment, while Stoneblood gives it some emergency sustain when things start getting ugly. This makes it a useful checkpoint tank before Mighty Orc becomes available. The problem is that Blood Mend only activates when Blood Gargoyle gets hit, so its healing is much less dependable than Mighty Orc's automatic regeneration. Add in the free cost price tag and the legendary investment, and suddenly this gargoyle is asking for a lot of money just to be your team's temporary punching bag. It works, but you probably do not want to build your entire future around it. Cursed Acolyte takes a completely different approach by basically showing up, pointing at an enemy, and making everyone's life significantly easier. Its 20% damage amplification can be extremely valuable against bosses and elite enemies, especially when several powerful carries are focusing the same target. The best part is that its main value comes from the debuff, meaning you do not need expensive mutations or huge levels to get useful results. Unfortunately, the effect only covers 3 targets, lasts for 5 seconds, and has a 10 range ability range, so the useful window can be pretty narrow. Outside of weakening Hex, Cursed Acolyte contributes almost nothing. Its stats are low, it has no passive, and you are still spending 2 cost on a unit that is mostly standing around waiting for its one big moment. Necromancer is another support that can become surprisingly useful when paired with the right damage dealers. Its attack speed buffs can improve basic damage output and become even more valuable when your carries rely on on-hit effects like stuns, burns, poison, or self-healing. And just like many support units, Necromancer does not need to be demonic or heavily leveled to provide most of its value. The biggest problem is its 10 range aura, which can be awkward to position once your defensive line starts spreading out. And when population is limited, simply placing another Skeleton Archer or Lava Imp on the field will often give you more immediate damage than the attack speed buff can generate. Helpful support, sure, but sometimes the best buff is simply having another guy who hits things. Finally, Soul Collector is probably the most ambitious unit in this tier, because its potential gets much better during longer runs. Soul Mark can build up a substantial personal attack bonus, while Soul Harvest can strengthen 2 important carries, and the Curate Aura provides passive value to nearby units even when the active abilities are not being used. Sounds great, right? Well, there is one tiny problem. Soul Collector needs final blows to ramp up, and your actual carries are usually the ones stealing those kills. That makes the whole setup a little awkward. Then you add the free cost and legendary investment, and it becomes difficult to justify all that preparation when a Deathlock can provide broader impact with much less setup. Soul Collector definitely has potential, but in practice, it sometimes feels like the unit is collecting souls that your carries already stole from it. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Skeleton Archer, Lava Imp, Hellfire Warlock, Demon Butcher, Bone Guard, Barbarian, and Crypt Squire. If you are looking for the unit that quietly carries your entire early progression while asking for almost nothing in return, Skeleton Archer is the obvious suspect. At just 1 cost, it is incredibly easy to build, duplicates are easy to obtain, and leveling it up is much faster than investing in higher rarity carries. Its damage is also surprisingly respectable for something that barely takes up any population. Bone Pin adds even more value by giving you cheap and repeatable control against bosses, and you can stack multiple archers comfortably behind almost any front line. The problem is that 100 base health is basically an invitation for anything that reaches the backline to turn your entire archer convention into a historical event. And eventually, stronger high rarity carries will overtake its raw damage once your account can actually afford to build them. Bone Guard is probably the most complete early game tank you can ask for. It is cheap to build, easy to level, and comes with a ridiculous amount of defensive utility packed into one skeleton, including taunt, blocking, shielding, and team mitigation. Its aura is especially valuable because it protects the entire formation, which makes its tiny attack stat look a lot less embarrassing. Of course, even the best tank eventually discovers that armor cannot solve everything. Bone Guard has no real healing, so attrition will slowly grind it down during long high-wave fights. Its shield and block also scale from a miserable 40 base attack, which means its defensive ceiling is lower than the kit initially makes it look. Still, for the early game, this skeleton is doing a lot more than just standing around looking bony. Then there is Lava Imp, who basically decided that setting everything on fire was the easiest way to solve problems. For 2 cost, it offers excellent sustained damage, with both its active and the passive continuing to burn enemies even between normal attacks. This makes Lava Imp a strong mid-game carry, particularly against bosses and durable waves where Skeleton Archer starts reaching its damage ceiling. The downside is that the damage is backloaded, so fast farming waves can sometimes end before Lava Imp gets to show off its full potential. Its epic leveling is also much slower than upgrading Skeleton Archer, and with only 300 health, one bad positioning decision can turn this fiery little demon into a very short-lived candle. Hellfire Warlock is a much more straightforward range damage dealer, and honestly, that simplicity is part of its charm. Hellfire Rain can target enemies globally, making it unusually reliable for checkpoint pushes and for dealing with enemies that somehow wander outside your normal coverage. With good base attack and a 7-target burst, Hellfire Warlock can simply be dropped into a formation and start doing its job without requiring some elaborate setup involving 17 different buffs. Unfortunately, the 3 cost price tag hurts, especially in farming setups where cheaper ranged units can cover more lanes for the same population. And because Hellfire Warlock has no passive damage over time effect, stun or aura, its impact drops noticeably between Hellfire Rain casts. Barbarian is where the bruisers start becoming genuinely dependable. It has solid base stats, strong active damage, and enough blocking to function as a reliable off-tank while still bringing respectable single target damage. It is also considerably easier to build than Demon Butcher, yet can deliver surprisingly similar practical performance through the mid-game. The main issue is that Barbarian has no healing, so prolonged frontline duty eventually starts looking less like tanking and more like a slow-motion retirement plan. The 3 cost and 5 range also become harder to justify once Mythic and Secret Bruisers start joining your account. Until then though, Barbarian is a perfectly respectable answer to the question, who is going to stand in front and hit this thing? Demon Butcher takes the Barbarian formula and adds considerably more raw power and sustain to it. This damage and sustain hybrid can block chip damage, heal through execute, and become even more dangerous when its health gets dangerously low. Its superior stats also make it a legitimate off-tank for more developed accounts. The problem is that the Mythic price tag does not exactly deliver a revolutionary upgrade over Barbarian. In a game where resources are always trying to escape your wallet, that makes the investment feel a little questionable. And while its best damage activates below 30% health, deliberately keeping your tank in that range is also known as living dangerously and hoping the healer has read the patch notes. Finally, Crypt Squire is the unit equivalent of ordering plain toast at a restaurant. It works, it fills the space, and nobody is going to complain, but there is not much to get excited about. With 1,440 base health and a 2 cost price, it is perfectly serviceable for newer accounts that simply need another body standing between the enemy and everything they own. Guard Stance also gives it a simple defensive window without requiring complicated synergies. Unfortunately, Bone Guard offers vastly more utility at the same cost, while Iron Skeleton brings sustain to the table, leaving Crypt Squire squeezed between 2 much more interesting options. With no healing, taunt, aura, shield, or meaningful damage, it is extremely easy to replace. Crypt Squire is not terrible, it is just painfully replaceable. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Mighty Orc, Deathlock, Abyss Stalker, and Plague Alchemist. Once you reach A tier, the units stop feeling like temporary solutions and start looking like the reason your run is still alive. Abyss Stalker is a perfect example, bringing excellent single target damage for just 3 cost. Its 280% burst flows directly into a 35% attack speed boost, giving it exactly what you want when a boss decides it has no intention of leaving peacefully. Compared with 4 cost secret units, Abyss Stalker is also much easier to squeeze into a population limited lineup while still delivering genuine carry level pressure. The downside is that it has absolutely no sustain or defensive utility, and its 5 range can become a real problem when the front line starts collapsing. It is also primarily a single target specialist, so against enormous enemy packs, units with true area of effect damage or team-wide utility can ultimately provide more value. Plague Alchemist is the kind of support that becomes more impressive the stronger your tanks get. Its percentage-based healing scales beautifully with massive frontliners like Skull King, Imperial Vanguard, and Mighty Orc because it does not care about Plague Alchemist's own attack stat, and with a huge 25 range, positioning is incredibly comfortable compared with supports that require you to squeeze them into one very specific pixel or watch the entire formation fall apart. The catch is that free population is a fairly expensive price for a unit that contributes very little direct damage. In fast farming runs, enemies may die before the healing even has time to matter. Plague Alchemist really shines when you have expensive, high-health frontliners worth keeping alive, while fragile teams simply do not get nearly as much value from the same slot. Mighty Orc is where tanking starts to feel almost unfair, because this guy is basically a walking health bar with a regeneration problem for everyone else. His unconditional regeneration is extremely reliable, even when enemy targeting becomes messy, making him the best non-secret tank in the game. And Mighty Smash means all that health investment is not completely wasted on defense, because he can turn his enormous durability into meaningful boss damage as well. The biggest obstacle is the free cost price, which is a serious commitment before you have enough population upgrades to comfortably support expensive units. He also eventually gets outscaled by Skull King and does not provide a taunt or team-wide defensive aura. Still, if you need something that can stand in front of an angry boss and confidently say, "Is that all you got?" Mighty Orc is one of your best options. Deathlock rounds out A tier by offering a very unusual combination of support and free extra bodies. One of its biggest strengths is that it provides excellent value without requiring a demonic mutation or heavy upgrades, which is surprisingly rare for a mythic unit. Its melee aura strengthens your frontline, while the free archers add both bodies and damage without consuming additional population, making Deathlock extremely efficient when used correctly. Of course, there is a catch because apparently every good unit in this game is legally required to have one. The aura only benefits melee allies and has a 10 range limit, so poor positioning can waste a huge portion of its value. Duplicate auras also do not stack, and with only 700 base health, Deathlock is not exactly built to survive a positioning disaster. Keep it safe and properly placed though, and it can provide an absurd amount of value for the space it takes. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Skull King, Demon Lord, Doomfist, Fallen Emperor, Imperial Vanguard, and Infernal Warden. This is where the roster stops asking whether a unit is good and starts asking whether your account can afford to own it. Fallen Emperor is the new premium range carry, and the numbers waste absolutely no time making that obvious. He comes with massive level 1 attack, a huge 25 range, and an 8 target meteor that deals 220% damage, so he is already an elite damage dealer before his aura even enters the conversation. That aura adds 12% attack and 8% crit, improving not only Fallen Emperor, but almost every carry standing nearby. The obvious problem is the 4 population cost and the secret upgrade requirements, which can be brutal if your account still needs to invest in cheaper units. He also wants a properly built formation around him, because wasting that enormous aura would be like buying a sports car and only driving it to the grocery store. Imperial Vanguard takes the opposite approach and basically asks one simple question: how much damage can you take before everyone behind you starts panicking? With a gigantic 7,920 base health, Imperial Vanguard has the strongest raw tanking foundation in the roster, while Bulwark adds mitigation and percentage-based healing on top of that enormous health pool. This makes him particularly valuable for high wave pushing, where the real objective is often just buying your backline enough time to keep shooting while enemy damage starts reaching completely unreasonable numbers. Of course, 4 population is a serious price for a unit whose primary contribution is survival, so you need enough damage behind him to justify the slot. He also lacks a team aura or taunt utility, meaning Imperial Vanguard has one very specialized career path, becoming an extremely expensive brick wall and refusing to move. Infernal Warden is what happens when a tank decides it would also like to punch everything in the room. His ridiculous bruiser stats allow him to hit almost like a dedicated secret carry while still bringing 5,220 base health, so enemies reaching him does not immediately turn into a funeral. Infernal Ring adds genuine multi-target pressure and applies a burn worth 140% of his attack over its full duration, making prolonged melee combat exactly where Infernal Warden wants to be. The obvious issue is that his range is still only 5, meaning all that expensive secret investment is standing directly in the danger zone. His 5th hit passive also needs consistent uptime, so short waves or constant target swapping can make the actual results much less explosive than the tooltip suggests. Give him time to fight though, and Infernal Warden becomes a very unpleasant problem for anything standing nearby. Skull King is still one of the best pure walls in the entire roster, and honestly, he has perfected the ancient art of simply refusing to die. His enormous base health and percentage-based healing scale incredibly well with levels, mutations, and additional health bonuses, turning an already massive health pool into something truly ridiculous. Deep recovery combined with pain. Recovery makes him one of the safest tanks for high wave content and can buy your backline an absurd amount of extra firing time. The catch is that secret rarity, forecast, and brutal upgrade requirements make Skull King a serious late game project rather than something you casually chase at the beginning. He also does not bring much team utility or wave clear speed. Skull King does not help you farm faster, he simply stands there until the enemies eventually question their life choices. Doomfist is probably one of the most complete hybrid units in S tier, combining excellent damage, a massive self buff, and attack scaling healing into one extremely aggressive package. Battle recovery is particularly valuable because the healing comes through offense, meaning Doomfist sustains himself while doing the exact thing you brought him in to do, beating enemies into the ground. This makes him excellent for surviving and contributing through late waves rather than simply waiting around for someone to hit him. Unfortunately, the 4 population cost and secret level investment are enormous, and an underleveled Doomfist can quickly become the world's most expensive benchwarmer. His 5 range also puts him directly into danger, so burst heavy waves can still delete him if the formation is not protecting him properly. When everything lines up though, Doomfist is exactly the kind of unit that can carry an entire section of a run by himself. And finally, we have Demon Lord, the dedicated carry that looks at dense waves and bosses and apparently takes both personally. Massive base attack, an 8 target burst, poison, and a useful enemy slow are all packed into a single unit, giving him an answer for both large groups and high health targets. His 18 range is another huge advantage because it allows him to deliver all that damage safely from behind your front line, which is exactly where you want a 4-cost Surut carry to be. The downside is that the investment is painfully backloaded, with both the 4-cost and secret upgrade requirements demanding serious resources before you get the full payoff. And while Demon Lord may look almost unstoppable from a distance, he still depends heavily on a durable front line. Once enemies reach him, that 1800 base health suddenly stops looking quite so impressive. Keep the enemies away though, and Demon Lord can turn the battlefield into a very one-sided disaster. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.